traumatic and horrifying thing.
So if you want to know who he's talking about me. And I highly suggest that you go follow him because he is fantastic and everything he said is very true. And this is definitely not something that I was ready to talk about. It was something that I was eventually going to talk about when I was ready. When I was ready to talk about the abuse and the traumatic events that I went through over 10 years ago, by the way. I don't know if that was brought up. This happened in 2013. 2012 is when the incident occurred, but the court records are from 2013. And I did pay to have those records sealed. So it's interesting that they're now coming out. I poked a bear. I poked a big one. My name is Sarah Fields. I'm an investigative journalist. I have fought so hard in the state of Texas to protect kids. And over the last 4 years, I have built a career as an investigative journalist, exposing horrific people who do horrific things to kids. And it's been very successful. A lot of my work stays in Texas, and I have made a lot of enemies, a lot of adversaries. And it's interesting that these records did not come up until now because people have tried very hard to bury me. Very hard. They could have found these records at any point, but they couldn't because they were sealed. And now all of a sudden they're not sealed, and I will be talking to an attorney tomorrow about this. I was in a very abusive marriage. I can still remember being held against a wall and being told that if I tried to leave, that he was going to take my kids and he was going to do anything he could to make sure that it happened. He was a cop. He was a dirty cop. And I knew he could do it. I knew if he tried really hard, he could do it. My divorce was long. It was horrific. I battled for my kids. And this particular incident occurred where this was his gotcha moment. This was like, I got you now. Now I can, it was something that he orchestrated. And he used it against me in court. He was very abusive towards me, but he was also abusive towards my kids. I did not know the extent at the time of just how far his abuse went, but I knew it was bad, and I wanted out. And I had many people behind me. I had friends behind me that said, what can we do? And they filed character statements for me to present to this judge. The judge's name was Judge Carol Clark. She is now retired. So many witness statements. There was a file this thick were provided to that judge, including statements regarding his behavior, my ex-husband's behavior, on what they had seen and how he had treated me and what they had seen him do to my children. When these documents were presented to the judge in the courtroom, and I was begging her to look at them because she wasn't taking my word for anything, I was laughed at. I was told that I was a liar. I was told that nothing I said mattered in that courtroom. And all my friends were there, and she looked at that file of all those statements, and she pushed it to the side and said it was all hearsay. I'm trying to keep myself calm. I had a deferred adjudication, which means that on record you have to plead guilty. Harry Sisson, however you say his name, said, well, why did you plead guilty? Literally everyone was against me. I had no representation. I had no money. It was a dirty cop, a horrific judge, and CPS, all saying that if I did not plead guilty and take the deferred adjudication, that they were going to take my kids. And he was going to get custody. So I did it because I wanted my kids back. I wanted my children. I got custody of my kids. There was a huge battle after that because I didn't want him awarded any rights at all. I didn't want any visitation because I knew what kind of person he was. And I fought for my kids, and he called the police on me I don't know how many times, trying to say that, well, she's not letting me see the kids on my weekend, and I wouldn't let him go with him. I just wouldn't do it. Years later, he was still a cop. It was found out that he had sexually gone after multiple minors, and there was an investigation ongoing on him. And my daughter came forward and told me everything that he did to her. This was years later. She had never told me these things before. I immediately called the police and said, my daughter is saying this. Fast forward. Once they realized that they had a case against him, he fled. He ran to Mexico. He stayed hidden for a long time until ICE finally picked him up in Mexico, and he was brought back. And he was convicted for horrifically harming my child. Things that I didn't even imagine his abuse went that far. We finally had justice. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The normal sentencing for someone that did what he did is 30 years to life, but he took a plea deal. I accepted the plea deal because I didn't want my daughter to have to take the stand and talk about what happened to her in front of a bunch of strangers. But I don't just hold him responsible, I hold that judge responsible. Because I told her in detail the things that he did to me and my kids, and she just looked at me, and I'll never forget, she laughed at me in that courtroom. So, now it's out. Now you know a lot about my past that I wasn't ready to share yet. I've thought about writing a book. And you know what? That's okay. It's okay that you all know. I'm okay with it. Because this is what they do. I healed. I became a strong woman. I became a fighter for children. I became a fighter for Texas. I became a successful investigative journalist. And I'm good at it. And that's why he has become like a caged animal over a fire. If he was not so scared, and if he didn't do anything wrong, he would not be fighting back so hard. He would not be bringing any of this up. He's terrified. And it means that I am right. That's what it means. If everything he's been saying is true, he would have blocked me and just not cared. But he hasn't blocked me. And he fights back aggressively, dirty. Everything I post on X, he responds to now, trying to destroy my name, trying to destroy my reputation, is not going to work. This makes me want to fight harder, and I'm going to. I 100% am on a war path now to destroy Harry Sisson. There were points in my life that I thought I was going to die, either because he was going to kill me, my ex-husband was going to kill me, or I was going to off myself. But I didn't do it because my kids kept me going. I wanted to decide when to share my story. Harry took that away from me, and whoever else is working with him and behind him. If he thinks that I'm going to stop because of this, he has another thing coming.